Hey everybody, I just want to talk about something that has happened this week in pop culture that I think speaks to the church. I often think that art can speak to the church. And something happened this week that I'm finding very interesting, especially when it comes to the church and our desire, hopefully our desire, to welcome people, to include more people, to be more inclusive and welcoming, and to lift up voices that are different than our own. So if you have followed me for any time at all, you know that I often talk about the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test, invented by a woman, last name Bechdel, I believe it's Alison Bechdel, came up 20, 30 years ago now. And the Bechdel test, it's for movies. And you can only pass the Bechdel test if you have two women who speak to each other, who have a conversation for more than 2 minutes about something other than a man. So two main characters having a conversation with each other about something other than a man. Now, it was stunning when this came out how few movies passed the Bechdel test. And so what this did is it lifted up the fact that women's voices were very underrepresented in our entertainment industry. People probably knew that already, but this test put a very fine point on it when you realized how few movies actually passed this test. It was ludicrous. Now, since then, more women have become directors, producers, writers. There are more women's voices, white women, women of color, LGBTQ women are being represented more than they were when the Bechdel test came out. However, still a relevant test, and a lot of movies still do not pass it. So something like that is designed to illumine us, to shine a light on this issue, that these are some voices that are underrepresented and we should pay attention to that. Now, we have rules like this in our church. We have policies, procedures in place that lift up something that should be paid attention to. Now, something came up recently this past week. So there's a new show out on Hulu, and it's called Fire Island. It is a queer retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And it is about gay Asian men on Fire Island. And another writer, not Bechdel, came out with a tweet that said that this movie does not pass the Bechdel test, that there's only one female character who's a lesbian and she does not have a conversation with any other women, and it fails, this very progressive movie fails the Bechdel test. Now, a lot of people responded to this saying basically that this person missed the point, that the point of the Bechdel test is to shine a light on underrepresented voices, and certainly the voices of gay Asian men, definitely an underrepresented population in our entertainment industry. And even Bechdel herself weighed in and said, an addendum to the Bechdel test: if a movie has two Asian men talking about the writings of Alice Munro in a movie that is based on the works of Jane Austen, it passes the Bechdel test. But the point is, the Bechdel test was meant to shine a light on the fact that our entertainment industry underrepresents the voices of women. But it shouldn't be used to bash shows that lift up other underrepresented populations. We should always look and welcome times when voices that have been underrepresented are lifted up and presented. Not only is it good for people to see themselves and hear themselves represented in our culture, but it's good for those of us who are not queer, not Asian, to learn a little bit about what that looks like and what that feels like. So I think this happens in our churches as well. We put in policies and procedures, and we adhere to those policies and procedures instead of the spirit in which they were formed. So sometimes, especially if you're Presbyterian, I'm sure you other people have problems too, we stick so much to our rules that we miss the point of what the rules are for. And when it comes to welcome and inclusion, I think it's something that we're struggling with in our churches. I hope it's something we're struggling with, because if you're not, you're probably not doing it right. We want to look at not just the idea of here's our policy on welcome and inclusion. We need to be looking at the voices that are being represented in our communities. Are underrepresented voices being lifted up? Are they being heard? Are they being listened to? Not just are we saying a welcome at the beginning of our service, which, by the way, is something I highly advocate for. I love that. I always do it. I encourage other people to do it. But if that's all we're doing as our call to welcome and include more people, we are missing the boat. So think about the voices that are being lifted up in your community today. Think about the voices that are not being heard. And how can you lift up and listen to those voices? Even if they're not a part of your congregation, how do those voices get heard in your context? And why is this important for Christians? Why does this need to be a church thing? Well, ostensibly we follow Jesus Christ. And Jesus was all about listening to and lifting up those underrepresented voices. Over and over and over and over and over again, Jesus reaches out to the people on the margins. Jesus paid attention to the hemorrhaging woman who reached out and touched his cloak. Jesus spoke to the woman at the well. Jesus went to the home of an occupying soldier to save his daughter. And in Jesus' perhaps most famous story, the one that everybody knows, whether or not you are a Christian, the story of the Good Samaritan, the hero of this story is someone that his own people would have ostracized. Yeah, Jesus was all about lifting up underrepresented voices, making sure that the people who were on the margins were seen and heard. And if we are to truly be the church of Jesus Christ, then that needs to be our goal as well. But I share with you the story of what happened this week to say that we are not the only people struggling with this. This is a struggle that everybody is going through because we have been so steeped for so long in this notion that normal is white, cis, straight, and generally male. So whether or not we know it or not, whether or not we want it to be or not, our brains have kind of been wired in that direction. So we need things like the Bechdel test. We need things like our policy. We need other voices to come in and remind us and not let us get stuck in those places where we think that white, cis, and straight is the norm. And we want to hear from many different voices if we are to truly be the body of Christ. So take a look, take a listen in your own community. Look at your welcoming policies. How could they be expanded? Who are the voices you are not hearing from? Who are the people who are not lifted up and visible in your community? May we all continue the work of welcoming and including and lifting up all of the voices in our community so that people feel seen and heard and truly included.